Hi guys, my name is Brielle and I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I am a part-time wheelchair user and I did a video series a little bit ago talking about like my experience getting a wheelchair and sort of like what that was like for me and how to navigate that. So today I wanted to kind of give you guys a list of sort of like, if you're considering yourself for a wheelchair, here's some things that you should think about in order to kind of see if a wheelchair is right for you and your lifestyle. First of all, I want to mention that disability looks different in a lot of different people. You guys have sometimes seen videos of me where I'm able to walk around all day and be fine. But there are other days where my blood pressure is just not able to stay at a point that is safe for me to be walking around like that. So I use a wheelchair on those days. I typically don't film on those days because it's hard enough to like navigate in a wheelchair, much less also trying to film. But I have filmed a few clips of me in my wheelchair. Sometimes instead of using a wheelchair, I will use my service dog Arlo. He is trained in mobility tasks, or I will use a cane. These things are helpful to me and in different ways. So not every person will find each of these things helpful. So I'm trying to sort of make this video in order to determine if you are considering a wheelchair for your disability, here are some things that I would think about. Every person's disability is going to be different though, so just because you have EDS or just because you have something else doesn't necessarily mean that a wheelchair is right for you. So once you've determined that a wheelchair would be helpful for you in terms of your disability, like if you've determined that, walking for whatever considerable period of time or in a certain terrain or whatever is unhelpful, and you've determined that a wheelchair would mitigate that, you can start thinking about these different questions to determine if a wheelchair would fit your lifestyle. So this isn't like a do you need a wheelchair list of questions. This is a would a wheelchair work for your lifestyle sort of questions. And I think a lot of people who are getting wheelchairs don't think about these things until after they have them, and they're like, wow, I wish I would have known this, or I wish I would have thought about it. So since I've had a wheelchair for a while, and my best friend has had a wheelchair for a while, I feel like this sort of compiles the different issues that we've come across, or different like things that we've come across where it's like, I wish I would have known that. So the first question is, do you live in a multi-floor home? What that means is, does your home like exist all on one floor so you can traverse the whole thing in a wheelchair and be fine? Or do you guys have stairs in your home? So that can be an issue. Like at my parents', I can't use the wheelchair inside the house because each level, we have the basement, then the mid-level, and then the upper level. They're all separated by stairs. The mid-level has the kitchen on it and stuff like that, and the basement has like my room. The top level has like the laundry room and my parents' room. So it's just not reasonable for me to use my wheelchair there. It's not very helpful because I have to transfer in and out constantly. So it's not helpful. So we have different mobility aids that I use in the house. But it is something that I wish that I would have thought more about. And I know for Michaela, it was definitely something that she needed to consider as well because her home has smaller doorways. And so her wheelchair can't actually like super easily fit in those doorways, which is a problem. So, there's different issues in terms of like your home's layout that you might want to consider. Is there a job that you can do, that you're qualified to do in your wheelchair? So if you are already employed, you can consider, does the current job that you have work in a wheelchair? So Michaela's job is a desk job right now, so she can do hers in a wheelchair. My job, where I'm going to be a social worker, I'm going to be moving around a lot. So hopefully I'll be able to do it in a wheelchair, but I know that there are some circumstances that I will not be able to. So consider that. Consider like, are your job requirements and responsibilities something you can do in your chair? Also think about if your boss will be accommodating, and think about your workplace, like the door frames, the area that you work in, the space, that kind of stuff. So like I suggested for the home stuff, think about that, but also for your workplace. Another question, which might matter significantly more to minors or people who live with their family, is your family supportive of you getting a wheelchair? Are they understanding of your disability? And will they understand your need for a wheelchair? I'm lucky that my parents know about my genetic condition and are aware of it. There was situations where I've had friends who their parents were not understanding, and so even though their doctors were like, hey, this person needs a wheelchair, and their insurance was like, we will fully cover it, they still didn't get a chair because their family was not supportive and their family did not understand their need to have this chair. So consider that, and maybe before you bring the chair home or use it a ton around your family, have a conversation with them about why you need it. That can sort of help as well. Can you afford it? So this question is difficult because some people are like, well, yeah, because I have insurance. But as a social worker, I know that insurance doesn't always cover things that you think it will cover. So if your doctor determines that you have a need for a wheelchair, that doesn't even necessarily mean that your insurance will cover it. So I would call your insurance and ask what their covering policy is for wheelchairs and other mobility assistance devices. They will usually have a written policy with different numbers of the the way that they classify wheelchairs. So K5, I believe, is an ultra lightweight chair. That's a custom chair. That's the one that I have. So they have different K whatever, and that classifies certain ones. So some insurance companies will cover K1 or something like that. I don't know what K1 is off the top of my head, but you get the gist. They'll cover some levels, but maybe they won't cover all of them. Or maybe for your disability specifically, they'll cover some, but not all. If you are not going through insurance, consider the fact that wheelchairs are pretty expensive. I would say in the thousands, just as a basic, if you're getting a custom chair, it's going to be probably in the thousands. If you're getting a chair from Walgreens or Walmart where it's not custom, it's just a typical hospital chair or transport chair even, they typically be around $50 to $100, something like that. And they're relatively affordable and they're good if you don't think you can afford a custom chair or something more specific for your disability. I would say a lot of what I would suggest is try out something like that first before you get a custom chair, because if you find out that using a wheelchair is too much of a hassle for you and you would rather not do that and you already spent all the money on a custom chair, or you find out that it doesn't actually help your disability as much as you thought and you already bought a custom chair, it's a lot. It's expensive. It's an expensive mistake to make. So I definitely suggest trying out one of the cheaper chairs beforehand so that you can determine if it's something that will be helpful and beneficial to you. Another thing I would definitely suggest to do is to seek out sources on your condition in relation to wheelchair use. So the Ehlers-Danlos Society has released a lot of information on mobility aids for people with EDS. That's definitely something that I would suggest looking into if you are an EDS patient. There's a lot of different resources for every disability that will discuss mobility aids. So I would just suggest typing into Google your disability or your symptoms and wheelchair or mobility aids. And hopefully you will find some information on your specific condition and the use of wheelchairs in relation to that condition. Another thing you can do is talk to someone else who has your condition and see if they have considered, or maybe they do have a wheelchair or another mobility aid, or they've tried those things and it is unhelpful or it is helpful and they can give you some tips. There's a lot of different support groups on Facebook that will have people with your disability who have been trying things or who are trying things, and that might be a good helpful place to start when looking for someone to talk to about this. And like I said, you can always rent one from a medical equipment store or a wheelchair dealer through your insurance, or borrow one from a friend, or ask your doctor about maybe trying one or buying one from Walgreens or Walmart that would sell just boxed ones. That's definitely a good idea to try before you actually get a wheelchair that is custom and very expensive. So again, this list isn't supposed to be do you need a wheelchair, in relation to your condition. What I would suggest is find that out first and then start considering these questions of, does a wheelchair fit into your life in a reasonable way? So I hope that this video was helpful in kind of giving you some things to think about in terms of getting a wheelchair. I obviously am not a doctor, and I'm not your doctor, and I can't give you medical advice, but I can give you the advice of someone who has now had a wheelchair for, I think, over a year, probably more than that at this point. And I've used it for a while, and my best friend has used hers, and I have a lot of friends and surface dog training clients that use them. And these are just things that I feel like people don't think about before getting them, and they then find out later, and it's a hassle in their life, or it's a struggle, or it just is a problem. So I hope that this list has been sort of helpful in helping you consider if a wheelchair would be helpful for you. And again, you can always reach out to me via email. I always keep my email in the description, or you can comment down below and I will try to respond as soon as possible. But this list is kind of a comprehensive list of questions that I've been asking people who will ask me, like, do you think a wheelchair would be a good fit for me? I just ask them these questions. Talk to your doctor about it, of course, but also consider these things as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys in whatever I make next. Bye.